The patience of Ukrainians is over. After hundreds, or probably even thousands at this point, attacks against the territory of Ukraine, they decided to strike the Russian military targets deep inside the territory of Russia. In the last several days, 3 Russian airfields were attacked, and Ukrainians are not planning to stop. But the main questions are: what will be the response of Russia? Will there be an escalation? And will this special military operation turn into the actual full-scale war? But more about all of this in just a couple of minutes. What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. And let's go straight to the point and see some most recent footage. And first of all, as you can see right here, the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, has been officially declared as the Person of the Year by the Time magazine. Next we go to Romania, where in this video we can see that 37 American armored personnel carriers are being transported to Ukraine. And previously the US pledged 250 of such machines, so consider this as a first batch. Going more to the south, to Turkey, we can see the floating power plants that Turkey pledged to send to Ukraine to help with their energy crisis. According to the initial plan, these ships were supposed to be docked in Odessa port. But since it might be a little bit dangerous, now it looks like that the new plan that these ships will be docked next to Romania, and the electricity to Ukraine will be supplied from there through the power lines. Next we have a picture of yet another search by Ukrainian security services in Ukrainian monasteries. And this time, these searches were conducted in Kherson, Cherkasy and Volyn regions, with the only reason to see if these monasteries distribute pro-Russian materials. And speaking about the monasteries, one Ukrainian priest from Luhansk region has been actually prosecuted and sent to jail for 12 years because he was passing the information about Ukrainian positions to the Russian forces. Our next stop brings us to Dnipro, and as you can see from this video, this city has been under attack this last night. And reportedly, Russians used the Iranian drone Shahed 136 for this attack, which basically allows us to assume that Russia still has a very little supply of these drones left. According to the Ukrainian Air Defense Forces, during the last attack by Russians, they were able to intercept 14 Iranian drones, as well as 3 other drones. As you might already know, the majority of such attacks by Russians recently are targeting the energy infrastructure of Ukraine. And according to this article, if these attacks do not stop, in the worst case scenario, the Ukrainian grid can completely collapse before the end of this year. And what it basically means is that the power outages, which last right now anywhere between several hours or maximum days, in fact in the future they can last more than several weeks. And because winter is coming, this can make many northern cities to be completely inhabitable. And then right here we have a picture from Kursk, where the governor of this region, Roman Starovoyt, is installing these concrete defensive pyramids called the Dragon Teeth. The reason for this is because one of the Russian airports, which has been attacked by Ukrainians, was located exactly in Kursk region. And just please hold on a little bit longer, we will talk about this in more details very soon. But spoiler alert, Ukraine decided that it had enough, and they also started attacking the military objects of Russians on their own territory. For this reason, there might be some very major events coming to us in the nearest future, and if you don't want to miss any of them, please consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel. You can also follow me on Instagram and ask me a question, and I will reply to you. Alright, and before I talk about incredibly important update from the East, today Vladimir Putin had a so-called conference, and he made some very interesting statements. And so that you don't have to see it yourself, here is your very quick summary. First of all, Vladimir Putin acknowledged that this special military operation might last way longer than anticipated. The next thing he said is that the partial mobilization in Russia of 300,000 people is completed. and 150,000 of them are already in Ukraine, and 77,000 of them are participating in combat activities. And please do not ask me what happened with the rest 150,000. The third thing Putin mentioned is that this war, in fact, was started by Ukrainians back in 2014. And as a result of Russian noble and defensive actions, the main achievement of Russia as a result of this war was that they acquired new regions, which are Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporozhye and Kherson. But we all know what happened with Kherson region back in the beginning of November, so in this video we might potentially see that Putin is crossing out Kherson region as a part of Russia. And finally, he was once again talking about the nuclear weapons. This time he said that the threat of the use of such weapons is getting increasingly high. But Russia, according to him, only considers the nuclear weapons as a defensive weapons. That is why they will never use it first. And then he continued and said that if Russia is not planning to use it first, it will not use it second as well. Whatever it means. Alright, and now as promised, let's really quick talk about the situation in the East. And first of all, according to the report by the Institute for the Study of War, Ukrainians reportedly were able to make incremental gains in the northeastern part of Kharkov region. And in response to that, Russians were concentrating their efforts next to Bakhmut and Avdiivka, and reportedly they were even able to make some gains next to Bakhmut area. In addition to that, over the last several days, Russians were sending significant reinforcements to Svatove. And then even more combat activities have been reported in Bilohirivka, Yakovlevka and Solidar. At the same time, even more Russian reinforcements have been reportedly sent into Avdiivka, and they increased the intensity of their attacks. And speaking about this place, last night Russians used this kind of weapon, as you can see in this video. Some people say that this is a white phosphorus, while the others mention that this is a thermite. So just please let me know in the comments what do you personally think it is. And then as you can see right here, this kind of ammunition almost immediately sets a big chunks of land on fire. And then we go to the most intense battle zone in the east, the city of Bakhmut, where as you can see from this video, both sides are engaged in artillery duels at nights. But the most important thing, according to this soldier, is that Bakhmut still stands. As we move deeper into Donetsk region, this last night Ukrainians reportedly were able to destroy a Russian military warehouse in Shakhtersk. And speaking about this city, there has been an accident between Russian military and civilian vehicles, as you can see from this video. As we move more to the south, Russians tried to advance next to Marinka and Novomikhailivka, but Ukrainians repelled both of these attacks. And then right here we have a video of the consequences of Russian attack against civilian area in Kurakhove. And ultimately, let's take a brief look over the changes in territorial control over the last several days. And first of all, as you can see right here, Russians were able to advance a little bit to the west of Velika Novosilka and Vuhledar. Next we stop in Bakhmut, and as you can see right here, the front line was pushed a little bit closer to the Russian side. At the same time, Ukrainians were able to recapture a little bit more land next to Bilohirivka. And then right here, we can see that both sides were able to adjust their front lines next to Novoselivsk. As you might have noticed, every single day I receive more and more footage, but unfortunately more than 90% of it I cannot show on YouTube. For this reason, I uploaded some of it to my Discord, and the rest will be available on my Patreon. And if you want to see these not allowed photos and videos, the links will be down below. Alright, and now let's talk about what we all came for, the full-scale offensive of Ukrainians. If you remember, over the last several days, 3 different Russian airfields in Bryansk, Kursk and Saratov regions were attacked, allegedly by Ukrainian drones. But according to the Washington Post, who rely on their sources within the Ukrainian government, these were indeed the attacks by Ukrainians. And then right here is the satellite image from Digilevo airport, located in Rязань region, which is right under Moscow. The picture is dated as December 4th, right before this alleged explosion of the truck, which was carrying petroleum. And as we zoom in, we can see approximately 15 Tu-22 long-range bombers and several Tu-95 bombers. In addition to that, the next day after the attacks against Engels Airport in Saratov region, the air raid sirens were heard around the city. And speaking about Kursk, which has also been affected recently, Russians were only able to extinguish the fire on oil reservoirs, which lasted more than 24 hours. As you can see from this map, these attacks against Russian military objects were located deep inside the territory of Russia. Which pretty much means that the Russian air defense system is not even close to being good, and Russia basically have no safe zones. And even though the Ukrainian government has not yet officially taken the responsibility for these attacks, according to Valery Zaluzhny, it shows that Ukraine might be able to strike distant targets in the nearest future. This does include the Russian military bases both in Crimean Peninsula and on the territory of Russia itself. The reason for these attacks is obviously that Ukraine just simply had enough. There were hundreds or probably even thousands of attacks of Russians against the territory of Ukraine so far, and Ukraine realized that they need to solve the problem and its roots. And even though improving the Ukrainian air defense system is extremely important, if you target these places where these attacks come from, you probably won't even have these attacks after all. And besides destroying the potential itself of Russians carrying out these attacks, Ukrainians will force them to relocate and disperse their missile-carrying planes, which obviously, as you might imagine, will disrupt the logistics of Russians even further. In addition to proving that the Russian air defense is pretty bad, Ukrainians were also able to start the psychological war against Russian forces, which basically means that previously the war was only on the territory of Ukraine, and now how would you feel if the war comes to your home? And reportedly, Ukrainians are trying to develop an extremely long-range drone which can potentially cross more than 1,000 kilometers. And if they are successful, even more distant Russian military bases, including the ones in Siberia, will be able to be targeted. And well, what is the response of, for example, America? Isn't it supposed to escalate the conflict? And according to the US Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, America is not intervening with Ukraine's capabilities to develop long-range drones. America also, as mentioned previously, never delivered such long-range weapons to Ukraine. And at the same time, Ukraine obviously has all the rights to protect itself. And then according to the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken, America is neither encouraging nor enabling Ukraine to strike targets inside Russia. Previously, Russia made several threats that in case the territory of Russia is under attack, Russia will be forced to use the defensive measures such as nuclear weapons. But as you can see, Russians have been pretty silent after these attacks against 3 Russian airfields, which pretty much allows me to assume that all these nuclear threats were just a bluff. Which basically means that most likely Russia will have to taste its own medicine and do nothing. But obviously there is always a chance for irrational response by the Russian government, and if you don't want to miss these events as soon as they start happening, just please once again subscribe to my channel, it only takes 1 click. And if you want to support my work, please consider becoming my channel member, use a PayPal link or become my Patreon, where you'll receive early access to the additional content. All the other useful links can be found to the right and down below. Thank you so much for your attention, товарищи, and see you tomorrow.